So give us a little bit of Ronnie Jackson 101 for starters. Who are you? Tell the folks a bit about yourself and why you've jumped in this race.
Well, I tell you, I say basically I'm just a small town kid from Loveland, Texas, who ended up on this path that took me in 25 years in the military, and then brought me eventually to sitting here with you. But I'll just tell you, I grew up in Loveland, Texas. Born and raised there. Blue collar family. My dad's an electrician. Mom's a homemaker. And they worked hard all their lives for everything we had, and continue to still do so. And I was telling some folks, I was actually stopped over in the coffee shop this morning, was visiting with a couple of guys, and I was telling them, I said, they were talking about potentially voting for me, and I said, I'll tell you what, I said, what I can do for you is I can identify with what it's like to be from a hardworking blue collar background from a town like Perryton, and have the idiots that we have right now up in D.C. trying to represent you. So I feel the pain from the folks in this area in rural Texas. So anyways, I grew up in Levelland, like I was telling you, and I ended up going to South Plains College, to junior college, in large part just because a lot of my friends were going away to college. My folks, quite honestly, didn't put a lot of emphasis on higher education. My dad, like I said, a pretty blue collar, and pretty much pulled me aside one day when I enrolled in college and told me, when are you going to, I was already working out in the oil field as a roustabout, and he's like, when are you going to get out there and really start working full time out in the oil field and get some seniority and give up this college crap,
Yeah,
So
I get it.
that's kind of the background I came from. But, I think he changed his mind. Maybe not until the dad graduated from med school did he actually kind of think maybe it was all worth it. And I'm not sure even then. But anyways, that's the background I came from. And I did a couple years at South Plains College, and went off, wanted to go be a marine biologist. And like I said, I was paying for all my own school. I've worked full time, and since I was 13 years old, I've had a full time job, and I'm not exaggerating about that. I actually, time I was 14, I was working 32 to 60 hours a week at United Supermarket, sacking, stocking, checking groceries. My family had an option. I could either go to football practice after school and be on the football team, or I could go to work right after school, clock in and work till 10, 11 o'clock every night, and have a car and, buy the clothes and the furniture I wanted, but otherwise I couldn't have both. So that's what I did. And, I worked my way through college doing that. And like I said, working out in the oil field as a roustabout, that's where I made most of my money for my college education. Saved up enough money to go off and to go to school at Texas A&M at Galveston, where I was a marine biology major. Did that for, there, and graduated from there as a marine biology major. And while I was there, I needed a little bit extra money. I was making ends meet. I was going home every time I had a couple of days off, spring break, Christmas break, whatever. And I was working out in the oil field again to get a little money for the next semester. But I wasn't quite making ends meet. I was making ends meet, but I didn't have any spending money, is what I'll say. I'd met my wife there. I was her resident advisor. I checked her into a room at A&M, and that's how we met. But I didn't have enough money to take her out and do much with her, So I went across the street to the University of Texas medical branch there, and I just got to tell you right off the bat, I never once in my life ever did I consider being a doctor. It never even crossed my mind, not even for a fleeting second. But I went over there and asked them about getting a job, doing something over there, make a little extra money. Figured I'd be working in one of their labs over there or something. They said, yeah, we'll put you to work. And so they got me a job in the pathology department as an autopsy assistant. Right. And I was like, okay, well, that's not what I expected, but I'll do it. So I went over, and my job was basically to kind of open up the bodies and, and take the skull off, get the brain out and all the organs out, and pass them down to the end of the table. And the pathology resident would, dissect them all out and figure out what the person died from. And the way it worked is they just started teaching me a little bit. They said, hey, remember that liver you took out last week? I said, yeah. Well, come on, look at this one. This guy's got liver cancer. See the difference? And so I got a little interested in medicine. So I kind of thought maybe I want to be a doctor, and I realized pretty quickly I'd been a volunteer firefighter for many years in Levelland when I was growing up. And so I'd worked with paramedics and EMTs a lot and things of that nature. So I pretty quickly realized I probably wanted to be an emergency medicine doc, which is what I am now. But I didn't know how I would possibly pay for med school. That's a much bigger deal than, paying for college. So I wasn't about to borrow the money. I was kind of raised where, if you don't have the money, you probably don't, to buy it, you probably don't need it. And I certainly wasn't going to borrow the money I needed for med school, because that was a lot. So I reached out to the military, because I'd been in the Corps my first year at A&M. And so I thought, well, maybe the military can help me out. So they did. They told me, we have a scholarship program. If you get into med school somewhere, we'll pay for it. Right. So I applied, and I got into the school there at University of Texas there in Galveston, where I was working as an autopsy assistant. And Then they paid for my 4 years of med school. So they paid for 4 years of med school, owed them 4 years in return, year for year. It's a pretty good deal. Figured I'd get out, go out and make a bunch of money when I got out, as an emergency medicine doc or whatever, that was kind of the plan. But, they got a hook in me. I really enjoyed my service to my country, and I really enjoyed my job. I told you I was a marine biology major, so I like scuba diving and things of that nature. And I'd done a little bit of that, mostly around spring-fed lakes and quarries and stuff in Texas, New Mexico, Balmorhea, Blue Hole, things like that. Never really any real diving. But I found out about this program they had. It's called a diving medical officer program. You could be a diver and a doctor. And I was like, man, that is tailor-made for me, right? So I applied for that program, got into it. They sent me to Panama City, Florida for 6 months, trained me as a Navy deep sea diver, got fully certified as a Navy deep sea diver, walking around on the bottom with the boots and the helmet and everything on, the whole 9 yards. And I did that. And so when I finished that, I was a diver and a doctor. So for the next 5 or 6 years, they preferentially assigned me to diving units. So I just went out and supported like explosive ordnance disposal teams and underwater salvage teams, underwater demolition teams, and Navy SEALs. And that's what I did for the next 5, 6 years. And that's where they really got their hooks in me because I was loving it, man. My job all day, I just go out and jump out of airplanes and fast rope out of helicopters and, lock out of submarines with the SEAL team and blow stuff up and shoot all kinds of weapons. I mean, it was like being 12 years old and getting a paycheck, it was awesome.
I saw that little bit of video that somebody sent me the other day. The pilot sent me of your ride and shooting at some targets out of the helicopter down around Canadian the other day. Now that you've told me all this, that wasn't squat, was it?
No, I've done a lot of that before.
That's like throwing a dart at the carnival. It wasn't even.
I've been with some operators doing that kind of stuff before, but I was out there with Jason Abraham, and that was a little bit different. Jason, he put on a pretty good show. He strapped me in with just a regular little car seat, a car seat belt, and then he rolled the helicopter over on his side a few times and made me wonder, made me hope that I put my seatbelt on good because that was literally all that was holding me in the helicopter. But no, I had a good time out there. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So how did you end up through this career working at the White House? You worked under President Obama and then President Trump as well. Was that in the same capacity?
Right. So I worked for President Bush, President Obama, and President Trump, all on active duty while at the White House. That was my active duty assignment. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that all evolved. But, when I was doing that stuff with the diving, I eventually decided, I had to get board certified in something to keep getting promoted in the Navy and move up. And at that time, I was pretty excited about keeping, having a career in the Navy. So I went back and I did an emergency medicine residency at the Naval Hospital at Portsmouth, Virginia. When I graduated from that and got board certified in emergency medicine, it was 2004, 2005. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were both pretty hot and heavy, right? So if you were a Navy board certified emergency medicine physician, you by default, you belonged to the Marine Corps because that's where they needed us, right? So as soon as I got board certified, they shipped me off to the 2nd Marines in Camp Lejeune. I married up with those guys, went straight to Iraq, and I went to a place called Taqadum. It's a little base between Fallujah and Ramadi. It's one of the most violently contested areas of Iraq. It was pretty nasty there. I said we got probably 3 or 4 bad casualties a day. Some days we wouldn't get any. Some days we'd get 15 all at once. But these are guys coming in with horrible injuries, with their arms and legs blown off, with their bowels hanging out and just horrible burns. I mean, bad stuff. So I did that for a year, for about 10 months with the Marines. While I was there, I got nominated for a job at the White House, which I didn't even know existed. I didn't know they had I guess if I'd have thought about it, I would have assumed they had a doctor at the White House, but I never really thought about it. And I certainly didn't know they had a military doctor there, right? But it turns out they had 2 Army, 2 Navy, and 2 Air Force docs at the White House. They didn't have an emergency medicine doc. They were all family practice and internal medicine. Well, they decided they needed an emergency medicine doc. So the Navy guy, one of the Navy guys was rolling out. So they reached out to my specialty leader, the guy that controls all of the, my billets, where I'm going, what my assignment's going to be, where I'm going to live, all that kind of stuff as an emergency medicine doc. He threw my name in the hat, without letting me know. I didn't even know it had happened. So I was out in Iraq and I checked an email account that I hadn't checked in like 10 days. It was from an old email account that I had from the hospital I'd come from. And there was an email in there from him. And he said, hey, you've been, nominated for a job at the White House. Please have your CV, your personal statement, your last 6 performance reports, your official photo, your security information, just a list of stuff 10 miles long they wanted. By the time I saw it, I had 5 days to get it done. I was like, wow, there's no way I can do this. I'm in the middle of the desert, right? So I wasn't even going to do it. But luckily, I talked to my wife that night, and she's been responsible for a big part of, for just about everything in my life that's pushed me in the right direction, not the wrong direction. But she she said, Ronnie, I told her, she said, are you going to do it? I said, no, there's no point in doing it. I'm not going to be competitive. She said, Ronnie, well, at least put the package in, and maybe it'll mean something someday down the road that you were considered for it. So I said, well, that makes a little sense. So I'll give it a shot. So I went ahead and I scrambled, got, was ginning stuff up electronically out there. She was sending stuff in, digging stuff out of the filing cabinet, trying to fax it in. So anyways, I got it all in by the deadline, but I figured I don't have much of a chance. Everybody's going to have a nice squared away package. I'm going to have a big pile of garbage, But anyways, I got it in, didn't hear anything for 2.5 months, not a single word, right? So I thought, well, somebody else already got the job and I'm just out here in the middle of nowhere and heard about it. I kind of stopped checking that email account again. It's just been so long. I thought it was over. And once again, I logged on there one day and there was an email in there saying, hey, you've been selected as one of 3 people to interview for a job at the White House. Please be at the White House in 5 days, right? I was like, whoa. So I was pretty excited that I made it that far, but I thought,
sure,
hey, this is where the road ends, right? So anyways, a lot of what happens to you in life is just about being in the right place at the right time and having a few people around you that really want to see you, be successful, but don't really have anything personally to gain from it. But they still, they still want to do it. And that was the situation I was in. It turns out that the commanding general out there for all of the Al-Anbar province, which is all the Marines in Iraq at the time, he used to be the military aide for Bush 41, the guy that carries the nuclear football, right? And so that guy, the guy that carries the nuclear football, the doctor, and the Secret Service agent in charge of the president's detail, they're together 24/7, 365, and always just a few steps away from the president, right? So this guy knew exactly what I was being asked to do because he had lived it for a few years, even though I didn't really have an appreciation for what the job was. Well, my commanding officer told his commanding officer, who told the general. Well, I didn't really know the general. I'd seen him walk through our tent a few times, our surgical tents, and we're getting casualties, but I didn't know him. But he summoned me to his office. And so he talked to me and he said, hey, Ronnie, he said, tell me what's going on. So I told him a story and he goes, what are you going to do? And I said, well, sir, there's no way I'm going to be in, in Washington, D.C. in 5 days. I said, but I'm going to try to do maybe an interview over the phone or something. Maybe I can do a video teleconference if I'm lucky enough, but I don't know how competitive I'm going to be, but I'm going to give it a shot. And he said, stand by. So he picked the phone up and he called the air boss, the guy that controls all the air assets, the planes and helicopters and everything for all the Marines in the area. And he talked to him. And then kind of last thing he said was, just to paraphrase a little bit, he said something like, I want his butt out of here by sunset. And he hung the phone up. And then he told me, go pack your stuff, you're leaving. And I said, yes, sir. So I went back.
Wow.
Went back to my little hooch and grabbed my sea bag and threw a few things in it. Went out to the flight line. He flew another doctor in from another base to backfill me, another emergency medicine doc that came in right away. I went out to the flight line, got on a helicopter, flew to Baghdad, got on a C-5 cargo plane full of broken helicopters, flew me to Cherry Point, North Carolina, got to Cherry Point, got a rental car, drove to Virginia Beach where I was living at the time. And, I'd lost 40 pounds out there. I was running in the morning, running in the evenings where I lost a ton of weight. I was supposed to interview 2 days in a business suit and 1 day in a uniform. Well, I had no clothes that fit at all, right? So I was kind of in a panic. So I ran down to the men's warehouse, bought a new suit, begged them to tailor it for me right there on the spot. They helped me out, brought my uniform in, kind of begged them to help me make that presentable. They did. Jumped back in my rental car, drove to D.C., interviewed for the job for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, they told me I got the job, got back on a plane, went back to Iraq, finished my tour for 4 months, and then came straight from Iraq to the White House. And that was in 2006 that I showed up, early 2006. And that was during the George W. Bush administration. And I was the new junior physician emergency medicine doc for President George Bush. And that's how it all started.
Wow.
Yep.
Other than that, nothing really going on, just kind of routine.
Yeah, well, what happened is I ended up staying. I was supposed to be there 3 years, just 3-year orders. But the doctors that were already there when I got there, they were pretty senior. They were colonels and captains with 20 plus years in. A bunch of them retired and left. So suddenly there was this big leadership vacuum, and I went from being one of the most junior people to one of the more senior folks, the physicians there. Well, so what they did is they restructured the White House medical unit at the end of my 3 years when I was supposed to be leaving, and at the end of the Bush administration, and they made me the deputy director of the White House medical unit. So I ran the White House medical unit during the Obama years, and that was my main role there. And then I did a good job doing that, and I ended up moving, from the deputy director of the White House medical unit to the director of the White House medical unit to physician to the White House, physician to the president, assistant to the president, and senior advisor, which is what I just left recently. But every time I got moved up, I got a new set of orders. The Pentagon cut me a new set of orders to remain at the White House on active duty there. So yeah, just retired from the White House 7 weeks ago, and just retired from the Navy 7 weeks ago. But I spent my last 3 years as President Trump's personal physician and one of his senior advisors, and that's what I did. So,
what was an average day like in those last 3 years as the president's personal physician and advisor?
Well, when you're the president's personal physician, I was taking care of President Trump. It's super busy. I mean, your mandate really is to take care of the president and the first family. So I was to take care of the president, Mrs. Trump, Don and Eric and Ivanka and Jared and all the grandkids and Tiffany, all of them. So the whole family, they were my patients, and that's my mandate. But what happens is you travel everywhere with the president. He's never without you. Anytime he leaves the White House, I'm with him, right? So what happens is you start developing relationships with everybody else in the White House, all the cabinet secretaries, everyone in the West Wing, and so what happens, you become everyone's physician over time. So very quickly, I'm taking care of the president and the first family, the chief of staff, the deputy chief of staff, the national security advisor, the press secretary. They're all my patients. All the cabinet secretaries become my patients. And then I end up, just because they get to know me so well and they trust me, they start calling me about their family members and stuff. So it just branches out. And pretty soon it's where, you're getting woke up at 3 a.m, and it's, one of the cabinet secretaries in a panic because, his aunt in Sacramento just got admitted to the hospital and nobody knows what's going on. Can I please help them find out what's going on? And then you spend you get up and get on the phone. You're talking to doctors. You're trying to translate and talk to family members. It's super busy. I mean, people think, well, what do you do if the president doesn't have a cough or a cold or whatever? But it's a lot more than that. And, in addition to that, I led the White House Medical Unit, as the director, commander of the White House Medical Unit. And so a lot of it's contingency planning. So we have to plan for every single place the president goes. I have to send a team out ahead of that with docs, nurses, PAs. We have to look at what are the medical resources available? Do we need to fly in our own surgical teams and have them ready to go and staged, on an aircraft or in the embassy or in a hotel or something, ready to go? We basically create our own hospital, our own trauma center when we go to large parts of the world, Africa, Southeast Asia. We have to create our own little trauma center. So we do all that, and that's my job to plan all that and make sure it's all proper and how to get there. Are we going to fly there in the helicopter? We're going to drive there in the cars, and what are the contingencies? So it's a busy job.
Wow. Boy, yeah. It sounds like it. So after all of that, back to the Panhandle and running for Congress. Tell us about that decision. Why?
Well, I tell you, the way it all evolved really was, I was going to leave before the Trump administration. I had already hit over 20 years. I'd already been promoted to Rear Admiral, and so it was time for me to get out and move on and do something else. But what happened is whenever President Trump got elected and they were forming the Trump transition team, the team that was going to decide how to set up the West Wing and set up all the appointed positions they needed and stuff. Well, the Trump folks didn't know a lot about that. They'd never been in the White House before, right? So they reached out to try to find some expertise on doing that. They put together the Trump transition team. It was mostly Bush folks from Bush 43. Well, all those folks knew me. I'd worked with them for 3 years. I'd taken care of them and their families. They were friends of mine, right? So as soon as they found out I was still at the White House, they started a little campaign to try to keep me, because they said, hey, we got a lot of unknowns. We got a lot of balls in the air, got a lot on our plate. The White House Medical Unit and the contingency operations for the president are working, are hitting on all cylinders. Please just stay for 6 months or a year to help us get, so we can get this other stuff kind of like we want it. We can not have to think about that or worry about that part of it. So, they eventually talked me into it, and I was planning to stay 6-12 months is all. But, I got really, the president latched on to me. He and I developed a relationship. He got to where he trusted me a lot, and I liked him, and we got along really well. And, it just, from that point forward, it really evolved, and I ended up just, staying long term. And, what really sealed the deal for me, as far as, basically led me to where I'm sitting right now here talking to you about running for the 13th congressional district is, a lot of folks might remember, some won't, but, I did the president's physical, right? And then I briefed his physical on TV, right, in the press briefing room.
And you dared tell America that the president was in solid health. And boy, here came the liberals to step in with their expertise, basically.
Yes, they did. I tell you what, and you see how it happened. But I tell you,
I watched it all.
Yeah. So what happened is, I did his physical, and they've been building a narrative for like 3 or 4 weeks, that he was physically and and mentally unfit to be president. You could go back and look at the news coverage. They were building this narrative. They thought that they were going to get him on that, right? So then whenever they do the press brief, normally it comes out in a written form, right? But I talked to the president, and he wanted me to go ahead and just brief it, in the press press briefing room. So I said, yeah, you bet. Well, I'd done some other stuff that hadn't been done too. I'd done some cognitive testing on the president and stuff. No president ever had that done. And I did that because I had long conversations with the president about like what was going on, with the, out in the media, this, that, and the other. And he asked me to do it. He wanted to put it to bed, right? So he asked me to do it. So I got it all together. I did it. Nobody knew we did it. Like I didn't, I was waiting until I was doing the brief to talk about, everything we did. And I did extensive cardiac testing and everything. I did all that stuff. I did a very thorough physical exam on him. Well, I got up there and I briefed it in the press briefing room. I ended up doing it for I was up there answering questions for over an hour, right? It was supposed to last like 10 minutes. I was up there an hour and 5 minutes. I was up there in front of them. Well, what happened is the press they couldn't let it go. They had Sanjay Gupta and, medical correspondents from MSNBC and people like that in there. They're not normally in the press briefing room. They were there as hitmen that day to take me down and undermine the president's physical,
Sure.
But it didn't work out that way. It's just, it was great the way it worked out, and I didn't know it was going to go the way it did. But what happened is the press started asking so many questions. They just started asking really foolish questions at the end. Even the other press that weren't there in the press briefing room actually made comments after it was over, like the press embarrassed themselves, right? So obviously it was again, right? Yeah, not the first time, not the last time, but obviously it was a big hit, with the president. I took that off the table. I mean, people just stopped. The whole conversation about him being mentally and physically unfit to be president just went away, and it's still gone even today. And that press brief was what drove that process initially. So, needless to say, the president was pretty happy that that I was able to go out there and effectively kind of brief his physical and put that to bed. And he was also he probably took a little bit of joy in the fact that the press didn't look so hot when I did it, and embarrassed the press a little bit.
Sure.
So yeah. Anyways. So, the president really trusted me, and that probably strengthened our relationship even more, just because, he knew, that I could stand my ground and do something like that. Well, what it did at the time that I was unaware of, and I figured out later on, is that was the day I got the Trump stamp on me. That was the day I became a marked man by the far left and by the liberal press. And they decided that day that if they ever had an opportunity to go after me and cut my head off, they were going to do it.
Yeah.
And so when I got nominated for the Secretary of the VA, that's when the knives came out.
Yep.
So I went through the nomination process for, a good 2 months almost. And a week before my hearing was scheduled, suddenly all these crazy, ridiculous, made up accusations came out. And I'd never, ever seen this happen to anybody. Now, it's happened several times since then, including to Justice Kavanaugh.
Right.
But I tell people, I got Kavanaugh'd before Kavanaugh did. I was the pregame, and I didn't know it.
Yeah, they primed the pump with you, basically, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did. And so what they did is, they were camped out at the bottom of my driveway with tripods and cameras. My family couldn't leave the house. I couldn't leave the White House without being mobbed. My kids were having to go. My daughter and my son were in college. My son was at the Naval Academy. My daughter was at college at Mount St. Mary's, and they couldn't. They were having to deal with all these crazy accusations. And we're from that's a pretty liberal part of the country, right? So people aren't very friendly to your family members when you're part of the Trump administration. You're just you can see what happens even going downtown to try to eat, and them kicking people out of restaurants and spitting in their food and all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
So it's a hostile environment if you're part of the Trump team there. And so what happened, I'd never ever seen that happen to anybody. And it was just these were the most unbelievable bogus accusations you could ever imagine. I mean, they put an accusation out there. John Tester, right, senator, right, took this accusation, anonymous accusation, and just gave it to the press, and they ran it. They knew that these accusations weren't true, right? And any two-bit investigator could have spent 2 days and could have verified without any doubt that these accusations weren't true. But they didn't care. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to get them out there, get them on the ticker, tear down the nomination, and then if they had to go back and say, well, it turns out this wasn't true at the end, that was fine, because that was never going to make the news like the others did, right? So they made up like accusations like that I went to a Secret Service party, got drunk, and wrecked the government vehicle. Okay, number one, I have never, ever, ever been in an accident involving alcohol my entire life, ever. Right? I've never even been to a Secret Service party my entire life. The crazy thing is, if you look back into the paper, like the New York Post or into the Washington Post, that actually happened to a Secret Service agent about a year prior. That exact story. It's like they took his name out of it, inserted my name in it, and gave it to the press. It was crazy. So I was astonished and just in disbelief that they were doing this and that they were getting away with it, right? And so anyways, I felt like the veterans shouldn't be a political football. Both sides of the party, Republicans and Democrats, should support our veterans, right? They're a national treasure, right? They fought and died so that we can have the freedoms we have. So you and I can sit here and talk on the radio about whatever we want. So I felt like the veterans and the VA was becoming a political football. I felt like it was distracting from the president's agenda, and he had a lot of big wins with the veterans, and I didn't want this to be a black eye on the VA or anything else, or drag down, anything. So I decided the best thing at the time was to withdraw my nomination. So I did. Well, what happened is President asked me to come back and do what I was doing before, be his docket or whatnot. I didn't really, at the time, I didn't think that was a great idea because I figured I was kind of looking for an exit strategy anyways. I've been doing that for a while. And I thought, well, if I go back and do that, I'm probably going to be there for the long haul. And I'm not sure that I want to be there, for years to come, right now. I wasn't sure. Mm-hmm. But he said he didn't want me to leave. He wanted me to stay. So he promoted me to assistant to the president and to one of his senior advisors. And I worked on medical policy, went out to the border and worked on a bunch of issues at the border in San Diego and in El Paso and the Rio Grande Valley and all that with a whole bunch of border issues. I went out the border multiple times. I worked on stuff with Indian Health. I worked on stuff with the VA. I was involved with the opioid crisis and things of that nature. So I worked on a lot of medical issues that are important to the president and his agenda and important to the White House. That's what I did for the last year as his senior advisor. But during that time, immediately after the nomination, I was pretty disgruntled. I was pretty disgusted with D.C. And I was like, this place it truly is a swamp and a sewer. I can't stand the people here. I can't stand the politics here. This is a nasty, disgusting place. I want to move home to Texas and get out of here. So that was my plan. I was going to retire from the Navy. I was going to do it this April, just in a few months from now, is when my retirement date was going to be. I was going to move back to Texas, have a much better, income than I have now, on my Navy salary. I could do that pretty easily. I was happy with that. My wife is super excited about it. We met in Texas and she couldn't wait to get back to Texas. And I was born and raised here. And, so that was the plan. But after about 5 months or so, I started I wouldn't say having regrets, but I started questioning what I was doing. And I told myself, wait a minute, am I going to be that guy? Am I going to be that guy that goes back, goes home to Texas and then spends the next 5 or 10 years talking about what an unfair process it was and how horrible it was and how unfairly, they treat people there, this, that, and the other. I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be good with that after a while. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm going to be good with the guy that's represented by that. You know what I mean? And I didn't want that to define me. It's not going to define me. So it's all circumstance, man. I mean, things happen, and you don't know sometimes why they happen, and they have, everything's timing. But when I saw that Mac Thornberry announced that he wasn't going to run again in the 13th congressional district, and several other representatives already said they weren't going to run, right? They'd already said they weren't going to run. And, none of those districts appealed to me. I never once thought about running those districts. I don't have anything in common with them. But whenever I saw 13 was open up, I thought to myself, you know what? This is just such a unique opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity, not just for me, and I don't want it to sound that way. It's an opportunity for the district. And I'll explain that to you. For the people in this district, I think, and I'll explain to you why. I thought, those are my people. I can go back to the 13th congressional district, right? I was raised in small town, blue collar, Levelland, Texas. We have farming, oil, and gas, and that's all it is there. I mean, we got nothing but cotton farms and pump jacks as far as the eye can see. Sure. And that's how my family made our living. If it weren't for oil and gas and farming, I mean, my dad wouldn't have put food on the table, right? So, anyways, I said to myself, I can go back to the 13th congressional district. Those are my people. I can represent them there, right? And I can do it without changing anything about who I am or what I believe, right? I share their same values politically, socially, economically, culturally. I share their exact same values. So I saw this when I realized that A, I'm getting out of the Navy. I'm retiring. B, Congressman Thornberry has decided that he's not running again and the 13th congressional district is open, right? C, President Trump's getting reelected. It's going to happen. Mark my word, it's a done deal, right? He's going to be in office for another year now and another 4 years after that. The reason I say this is an opportunity for me and for the district is because it's all about timing. If I were telling you this 6 years ago, if 6 years from now, it wouldn't apply. But for the next 6 years, Congressman Thornberry was there for 20. He's going to be there 26 years when this is all over, right? He's got a ton of influence, right? I mean, when he speaks, people listen. When he's got a problem with the district, people want to figure out what it is and how they can help him fix it, right? He's got a lot of authority, right? He chairs committees and ranking member on committees now, right? The day he leaves, that's zero. It's gone. The district's going to have a freshman congressman or congresswoman in there who is going to have no influence whatsoever. And they won't have for 6 to 8 years until they get time on station, until they get tenure. Everything is based on how much time you have in the job, right? I am the exception to that. And I'm not the exception because it's nothing to do with Ronnie Jackson. I am the exception to that because of circumstance. The circumstances are I just came from the Trump administration, right? And I'm a trusted advisor of the president and the entire administration. I know all the cabinet secretaries. I know them all. I have their personal cell phones. I have their home phone numbers. I've taken care of them and their families for the last 3 years. When I ask them when I have a problem, they're going to pick the phone up, want to know how they can help me fix it, right? I know everybody in the West Wing, chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, national security advisor, domestic policy council, all friends of mine, right? I will be, if I'm blessed enough to represent this district, probably the only freshman congressman that can walk into the Oval Office unannounced and tell the President of the United States, sir, I got an issue I need to make you aware of. I need you to please stop what you're doing and listen to me. And he will stop what he's doing and listen to me. Now, that's unusual influence and access that the 13th congressional district will have if they choose to make me their representative. And I'm not saying anything negative about any other candidates. There are 15 people in this race, and they are all good people. And I've met them over on the campaign trail now. They want to do the same thing I want to do. They want to serve their country and serve their community, right? And they're good people, and good, hardworking people, and
sure.
So, but what I can say is everybody has to tell the voters what they bring to the fight and what they bring. What is it that's unique about them that makes them, special for the job. And I'm just telling you right now, that's what I bring to the fight.
And very unique, no doubt about that. Did you make and announce this decision before or after you talked to President Trump about it? Has he talked to you about it? Did he learn? Did he encourage you to do it? How did that go down?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was the first person I talked to. I mean, literally, he was the very first person I talked to. I went to the Oval one day, and I was talking to him, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing something. And he said, what's up? And I said, I'm thinking about leaving. And he said, leaving? And I said, yeah. And I said, I'm going to run for Congress. And he said, what? And so I told him I was going to run, and I wanted to run for Mac Thornberry's seat in the 13th Congressional District. And he called his political folks in and asked him what was going on in 13. We talked about it a little bit, and he's excited about it. He thought it was awesome. He was very excited about me running. He's been real supportive. He asked me about it every single time I see him. I popped into D.C. for 2 days the other day to meet with some of the Texas delegation and some of the Doctors Caucus and a few other people. I just was in and out for 2 days, but I made a point to pop up to the White House. I went in, I saw him. Saw multiple people there. Said hi to a bunch of folks that I used to work with. But I saw the president. I talked to him about it. He asked me how the race was going. He's fired up about it. So he tracks it. He's tracking it closely, and he's excited I'm in the race.
Will he endorse you at some point? Have you thought about that? Is that important to you? Would you ask him to do it? Would you need to, or is that just a minimal part? It seems like it might be major.
No, I think it would make a big. It would make a big difference, right? I'm not going to ask him to do it, because I just the relationship we have. I think everybody's aware of the relationship that we have for the most part. And when I very first told him I was going to get in, and I thought about mentioning it at that point, but I didn't. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. Now, we'll just see where things go. But when I first started talking about getting in, and the last time I talked to him before this time I just described, I thought about, I wonder if I should just talk to him about officially endorsing me or whatever. But literally, that was the day that they were having the impeachment hearings where he was getting impeached. And I was like, the President of the United States, he's dealing with getting impeached today. Ronnie Jackson is not going to put the congressional district, the 13th congressional district on his plate today. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the way I am. I'm not gonna talk to him about something like that when he's got something as serious as this impeachment stuff going on. He's got a lot on his plate, and I don't need him to focus on anything related to me right now. I need to, and I could fight this fight, as well. The president respects, somebody's going to get out there and fight. He likes fighters, so.
Yeah. Back to the president's health for a moment. I was going to ask you about that as his longtime personal physician. Mm-hmm. He is literally as healthy as your diagnosis. I mean, just looking at him, I think some of us hope he's healthy.
Yeah.
Those of us that are happy with what he's getting done in the country, and I'm certainly one of them, and of course in this neck of the woods, as you know, in this 13th district, the overwhelming majority are.
Yeah.
But you look at him and he looks thick. Yeah. And you just go, is he getting any exercise? And I hear him talking about the fast food diets and whatnot. I want him to stay healthy.
Yeah, right.
Does he exercise? What's the
here's the
take on it?
No, he doesn't exercise. But he, other than just, being up, probably 6 hours longer than all the rest of us, and burning calories doing that. But I tell you, when I briefed his physical, and I talked to the president about it, I said, there's two things the president could do to be healthier. He could eat better, right? And he could exercise, right?
Yeah,
and,
I do remember that.
We worked on his diet some, and he's working on, cutting some of the carbs out of his diet and doing stuff like that. He's willing to work on his diet and eat better, right? Exercise, he's probably not going to go down that path. I mean, the way he sees it is, he's as old as he is, and he's not done it, the last, recently, and it's not been a part. And He's happy with the with his health right now, and his health is incredible for his age. I mean, it really is. He's roughly the same age as my dad, and he gets around a lot better than my dad does, and a lot better than a lot of folks his age. I mean, I put him on the treadmill, and we didn't. I had all this information at the brief or whatever, but he scored in the top 10 percentile for his age group on the treadmill. I mean, he dominated the exercise stress test on the treadmill. He's in great cardiac health, right? So I mean, you pick your vices in life. I've done things that have probably impacted my health over the years.
Sure.
But he's never drank and he's never smoked ever. And, if you spend your whole life and you never have a drink and you never smoke a cigarette or cigar or anything else, it's going to translate into long-term health benefits. And I think that's what the president, that's why he's where he's at. I mean, he's led a healthy life in that regard, So yeah, his diet could be better, and yeah, he could exercise a little bit if, that might help things, but just like I told the press, and it infuriated him when I said it, but I said, if he worked on his diet a little bit and exercised a little bit more, he might live to be 200 years old. Who knows, right? At the rate he's at now, I said it jokingly, of course, but but anyways, he's in very good health, and he definitely is more than healthy enough to serve us another term as president, which I hope he does.
If you have just joined us, we're going overtime with Ronnie Jackson. Mr. Jackson is one of the 15 Republican candidates wanting to replace retiring Congressman Mac Thornberry. Mr. Jackson has a very unique resume in that he's worked in the White House, served in the military for 25 years, worked in the White House as the personal White House doctor of 3 different presidents, including most recently, of course, President Trump. What's your take on President Trump and the job that he's done for this country so far?
Well, I'll tell you, I think he's done an incredible job, and I think we have to qualify that too. He's done an incredible job, and I think he's done more than any administration I can, in my lifetime that I can remember, in his first 3 years. And he's done that despite the fact that he's had to deal with, them coming after him since before he was even inaugurated, trying to basically undermine him and get him out of office. So despite all that he's had to deal with from the left, and from the from the Democrats and from the liberal press, which that's a little redundant to even say that.
Are one and the same.
They're one and the same.
The Democrat Party
part.
press, absolutely.
Yeah. But despite all of that, and all he's had to deal with, he's done an incredible job. He's got a lot done for our country, and I'll tell you, he's done things for our country that will matter to us for decades. And the one thing that people should appreciate the most is he is killing it on the judges. Right? He's got 2 Supreme Court justices in, and I'll tell you right now, when he gets reelected in November. He's going to get a third one, right? He's going to get a third one because Justice Ginsburg is probably not going to hang in there for another 5 years, from now. And so we're going to get, he's already got 2. He's probably going to get a third Supreme Court justice in. Just judges all over the country, all these federal judges that are being appointed. Those are things that are going to impact us for the next 30, 40 years that are going to impact our country.
Like 180 or something to this point of these judicial and appellate court judges, literally coast to coast.
Yeah, it's incredible. He's done a fantastic job. He's taking care of our veterans. He's stepped up to the plate, and he's been a strong voice internationally for us. Folks know they don't mess with our country anymore. You know what I mean? If they do, there will be consequences, right? So he's reestablished a lot of respect that we have as a nation, and with the authority and the power that we wield as the United States as the greatest military power, on the planet. So he's done great for the military, great for the veterans. He's done great with our judges. He's done a great job across the board, and that's despite all the stuff he's had to deal with, this impeachment garbage.
Having served in our military and served our country literally around the world and worked so closely with the president and his advisors and other leaders, what's your take when the liberals throw all this criticism at him about we're a laughingstock, people around the world no longer respect us? And I mean, just, of course, I'm biased in my opinions, but I'm looking at this and I'm going, are you kidding me? Draw a red line that means nothing. President Obama, deliver $150 billion or more to the mullahs of Iran under cover of night. And you're going to tell me about that people think we're weak and disrespect us. They may not like him at times, but in my opinion, he's been the strength that we needed to restore our presence in the world. And you say?
Well, I say I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and I think, those are liberal talking points, right? And they're just desperate. They're just grasping at straws. They're trying to take anything, and they try to take a lot of these good things that are happening, they try their best to spin them negatively somehow, right? But you're right. I mean, people know that if they mess with us, that he will pull the trigger on something, right? And he's not just talking.
Just recently with Iran,
Yep.
one of the latest examples, right? No, he doesn't want wars. He doesn't want endless
Right.
wars. He's made that clear. Going to get us out of some of the conflicts where we need to withdraw, if that's
Right.
the case. But hey, you kill an American, you're going to suffer.
Right, I agree 100%. And the Iran thing is a perfect example. He was forceful when he had to be forceful, and then he used restraint when it was time to use restraint. But he definitely sent a message, and the message was, just like you said, you better be careful what you do, because if you intentionally or unintentionally kill American citizens, there's going to be a price to pay.
What is your take on the man, President Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of respect for him. Obviously, I think, like you said, I think his leadership style is a little unorthodox. I mean, it's not the traditional leadership style. And he's like no one I've ever met before. He's very unique. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, well, what would you compare him to? There's no comparison. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He's like nobody else you'll ever meet. And I think the people, the country and the world see that. He is in real life what he is on TV. He's not something different. Behind the scenes. But I have a lot of respect for him, because I think he knows how to get things done.
He's a doer. He's a fixer, isn't he?
He's an absolute doer, and he expects results. And and if he didn't get the results he wants, he quickly changes course and gets new people in place, and he gets the results he needs and the results he wants. So he's a man of action.
He loves America, doesn't he?
Oh, he absolutely does. And he takes fantastic care of our military and our law enforcement, right? And our law enforcement, man, these people, I feel so bad for them. The respect they get from people in this country is pathetic. I mean, these people are putting their lives on the line every single day to keep us safe. And people in this country, it's shameful how people in this country treat our law enforcement. And President Trump is a huge, huge supporter of law enforcement.
What has it been like for you to watch this whole impeachment fiasco? Thinking of the president and serving under him the way you have and do?
Well, it's been frustrating. I feel bad for him, and I feel bad for all the folks in the White House that have to deal with this all the time. I'll tell you, it doesn't get to the president like you think it would. You know what I mean? He's he's dealt with this kind of stuff his whole life, and he's just like I said. He's not like you and I. You think that the stress of this day after day would build on him and bring him down, but it doesn't. He goes to bed every night. He gets up every day. He's recalibrated, and he's ready to get in the fight again. He's different in that way. So he can handle it. He can definitely handle it. It's hard on some of the staff at the White House because they spend long hours, dealing with this kind of stuff. It's been a shameful, colossal waste of taxpayer time and money. And it's been 3 years where Congress should have been out doing things for the people, taking care of us. And they've done nothing but focus on this, the Democrats.
In closing, Mr. Jackson, one final thing that you'd like the voters to know and consider.
Well, I'd like to say, get out there and vote. You got to remember that you live in the 13th Congressional District of Texas. This is the most conservative district in the entire United States, and whoever wins this Republican race is gonna be your representative. So I've talked to quite a few folks that are talking about voting in November, but you got to get out and vote on March 3rd. Okay, early voting starts on the 18th of February. If you're get out there and vote, and you have to vote on March 3rd to make a difference if you want your vote to count. So get out there, vote March 3rd, and vote for Ronnie Jackson. And you can look me up on Twitter or on Facebook, or you can go to my website, which is www.ronniejackson4 Texas TEXAS 13.com. So RonnieJackson4 Texas 13.com. You can find a little bit more about me there, and you can also get access to my Facebook and my Twitter from there. But get out and vote for Ronnie.
One more time on the website.
Website is www.ronniejackson4 Texas 13.com, and 4 in Texas are spelled out.
Okay. FOR instead of the number. Ronnie Jackson for Texas District 13.com.
Right. And I'll just mention real quickly that I'm going to be out at the Smokehouse in Perryton at 12 o'clock today. If anybody's out there that want to stop by and say hi, I'd love to meet you.
Ronnie, it was a pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you very much again for your service to our country and for your time today.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time.
Our pleasure. Thank you, sir. Ronnie Jackson.